Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Ewan, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Teachers College. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for our last Alumni Career Development Webinar for this academic season, featuring Cristina Compton. The webinar series covers a range of career topics and includes speakers from a variety of backgrounds. The series is co-sponsored by the TC Office of Career Education and Professional Development and the Office of Alumni Relations. Videos of past webinars are available on our website at www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Today, alumna Cristina Compton presents Pursuing Your Passion, How to Navigate a Career Change. Cristina began her career in education as a New York City Teaching Fellow, teaching in a Title I school. She currently serves as the Director of Program Development for the Center for Professional Education of Teachers, also known as CPET. In this role, she designs and executes promotional campaigns aimed at recruiting, sustaining, and growing CPET partnerships, coordinates and manages a wide range of projects, as well as hires and trains new coaches. Cristina also leads the Student Press Initiative, SPI, an initiative that supports teachers and students in developing projects that culminate in a professionally designed print-based publications. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that if you have any issues with the audio, please chat me directly in the chat box. And without further ado, here's Cristina Compton.
Hi, thank you so much, Alyssa, for that wonderful introduction. As Alyssa said, I'm Cristina Compton. I am very, very excited to be with all of you today. As a TC graduate and now a professional at Teachers College, I'm really honored and privileged to be able to chat with you today and offer what I'm really hoping will be some helpful tips and tricks that have certainly served me well along my professional journey. Just as a disclaimer, I certainly don't consider myself an expert when it comes to career changing, but I will certainly tell you a bit about my story and what I have found to be particularly helpful. And again, ideally, you'll be able to walk away with some ideas and suggestions for your own experiences and your own careers and your own jobs. So with that, let's just see here. There we go. So in a lot of my work, as Alyssa described, I'm in professional development, and I always love to sort of set the purpose and the goals for our webinar. So I'm definitely going to be sharing a little bit about my professional journey and what brought me to the field of education. As I said, I'm going to explore some tips and tricks that I found particularly helpful in navigating my career change. We're going to engage in some exercises to get us thinking about our own experiences. And then I definitely want to provide some space at the end for questions, comments, and any thoughts that you might have. So some of you may actually be familiar with this application, but I would love for us to engage in some polls. So if you're on your computer, you can go to the website that's indicated there. And if you are using a smartphone, you can text the Cristina Compton 012 and then that code there to join. I'll just give you a moment to do that. I will also encourage you to stay logged in because we are going to be engaging in a couple of other polls throughout the webinar. So rather than having to sign on again, you can just keep it open. Okay, so our first poll is I would love to get a sense of where you are on your career path. And I've presented some options there for you to be thinking about, and just go ahead and use your application to fill out where you might be. Oh, interesting. So we have almost everybody starting out in a new job or a new career. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Right, very interesting. So a lot of us are just starting out, but then some of us are definitely in a position that they are enjoying and are interested in growing. So as I go through some of my experiences and some of the helpful tips and tricks, I will allude to some of these different stages. Great. Oh, wow. Okay. Our next poll this is kind of a little bit more open-ended, and I wanted to get a sense from you what you recognize as most important when it comes to your job or career. It can be, anything that you recognize either has been important to you or you're recognizing more recently it's been important to you. I love these word clouds, right? They're a nice work of art as well. Wonderful. So I definitely see a prominence of learning and purpose and fulfillment, all really, really wonderful things. Okay, great. So, and I definitely want to encourage you to keep those things in mind as we engage in the rest of the webinar as well. Okay, so to give you a little bit of my background, and especially when it relates to education, I was an undergrad at New York University. I'm originally from California, and I had my sights on NYU from a very young age. So I made the transition to New York at 18 and attended New York University and received a bachelor's in science. My major was actually in communications, and I minored in marketing, and I was really interested in pursuing public relations, advertising, marketing. I even had a very specific goal of working for AMFAR, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, and doing some really glamorous PR work for them. Didn't end up working out. But as you can see, education really wasn't on my radar at this point. I certainly wasn't interested in pursuing education and didn't even think about education at this point. So just kind of to give you, again, a background of where I was, 21 years old. So right out of college, I pursued a couple of different jobs. The event planning, I was an event planning assistant, was one of my first jobs. And a lot of that involved coordinating political events and rallies. And that was for about a year. And then I was an account executive for a digital media company, which was very much a sales job where I had a quota each month, and I was working to sell promotional materials for some high-end clients in the fashion and cosmetic industry. I was also a media buyer for a company, and I was specifically focused on the client Bayer aspirin. So that was a lot of tallying and organizing and using spreadsheets to ensure that their commercial time on network television was being effectively executed. And then I was also an account executive for a public relations firm really focused on environmentally friendly products. So that was a lot of outreach and writing of press releases and managing a team of interns. So as you can see, a lot of these jobs were short-lived, some just under a year, some just a year. So I kind of bounced around a lot, which brings me to my first tip that I want to offer, which is that taking a break is okay. And there's a quote that I have learned to sort of live by, and it's a quote by Einstein. And it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And like I said, for those of you that may be at a point in your career and you're not particularly happy, or you're not particularly fulfilled, this might be a helpful tip for you specifically. I was unhappy in a lot of those jobs for various reasons. Many of them I quit. One of them I was even let go. And I realized that I could keep trying and I could keep interviewing, but I genuinely felt lost. And I didn't feel like it was the most productive for me to continue doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. So I pushed pause and I took a break, and I actually became a waitress. I told myself that I wanted to do something totally different. I wanted to do something mindless, or at least I thought it would be mindless. And I told myself that I would try this for a few months and then regroup and really get back to the grind. But what I found was actually that my experience as a waitress was really enlightening and really informative, because I learned that I really enjoy working with people and cultivating a strong sense of community, which is often what you get in the restaurant industry. I don't know if any of you have worked either in earlier years or even more recent years in the industry. It's very community oriented. And I discovered that I really enjoy service and helping others and working with a diverse group of individuals. So this really informed me in what I wanted to do moving forward, which was enter into the field of education. So I think my advice would be to really take a step back when you feel as if you're not in a place that you really enjoy or you're feeling fulfilled. Perhaps try something totally different and outside of your comfort zone, because that distance can be particularly insightful. And I think it's always helpful to set a timeline so that we don't get stuck in that, I always joke with some of my artist friends, that starving artist syndrome, right? Where we are an artist, but sort of on the side, and we get stuck in something other than the field we're really interested in for too long. And I think the importance of this is, like I said, a break and a pause can be a really powerful clearing and cleansing exercise and offer some much needed perspective. And like it did for me, it can actually help you inform and inspire your next step. So I want us to try something like this for ourselves. And I want us to take another poll. And I want you to think about that, you know, especially for those of you that put that you're in a career and you may not be completely satisfied. If you were going to take a break, what would you do? I'll leave you guys to sort of answer that. Oh, nice. There's a little bit of a lag as far as what I'm seeing and what you guys are seeing. So I apologize about that. There was really not much I could do about it, but they're coming up now. So that's good. Nice. A lot of people saying travel, which I wish I could have done more of, but money, I think, was a little bit of an issue there. Nice. Great. Yeah, that's a great idea. Taking a course in a different field, internships, all really wonderful things. And I would encourage you to continue to think about that if in fact you find yourself kind of hitting a wall. Okay, so let's move on. So as I said, I really transitioned into a completely different field than what I was involved in before, and I entered into the field of education. And I did so through the New York City Teaching Fellows, which was a program developed to encourage non-education majors to enter into the field of education. So I went into I sort of entered education through a roundabout way, an alternative route. And this program, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it is a program that's built upon the idea of students or fellows pursuing their master's in the evening and teaching during the day in a high-need, low-income school, a Title I school. So I landed a job in a school in Brooklyn, an elementary school in Brooklyn, and I was teaching third grade. And I, as I said, was pursuing my master's at night at Brooklyn College. And I, over the first couple of years, I didn't really know a lot of what I was doing. I had really no idea, but about the third or fourth year, I really started to develop a passion for literacy. And when I say literacy, I mean the teaching of reading and writing. And I really, really found that that was the most enjoyable subject areas for me to teach. And if you recall, elementary school is every subject area. So I really wanted to specialize and focus more on the teaching of literacy for my career. And I thought about how I could do that, how I could really specialize and further myself within this area. And that actually brings me to tip 2, which is this idea of making time for reflection. And I think that this is particularly helpful for those of you that may be in a career or on a path that you are enjoying, but you want to explore what else or what could be next. And what really helped me understand my passions and my interests and inform sort of my decision to further myself in education and specialize in literacy was reflection. And I would actually keep a journal at my desk and would write down my experiences whenever I could. So if I had a great day, I'd write down why. If I'd had a not so great day, I'd write down why. And over time, I would really return to this journal to chronicle my thoughts and experiences and use it to consider how I might inform my next steps. And like I said, I found this as a really, really helpful exercise for me to discover and uncover what I really liked and why, and maybe what I didn't like so much and why. So what I would really suggest is doing something similar and whatever feels most comfortable to you. So it can be a journal, like I did, but it can be lists. I know a lot of my colleagues love to do the pro-con lists. A colleague of mine even likes to keep a scrapbook because she's a little bit more artsy. So she would gather photographs or documents to kind of help chronicle her journey. And really reflect on what you find most enjoyable and why, as well as what is not so enjoyable and why. And keeping it in a safe place so that you can return to it regularly and think about your experiences and make sense of those experiences and see what sort of common themes or threads emerge. And I think the why is, especially for me, it really helps identify your strengths and your passions. And it can help really define a career for you and a field for you rather than continuing to jump from job to job, right? I think for me, there's a big distinction between a job and a career, and understanding what you really enjoy and what you really find fulfilling for you can be very informative in terms of identifying that career and that fulfilling profession and field for you. And then always for me, I found it really, really helpful to figure out what you don't like or what you don't want to do, because it's just as important, if not more important, than knowing what you want to do. So narrowing things down. So I want us to engage in a similar exercise, and I want to introduce another poll. And I want you to consider your current, if you have one, or your most recent job, and think about, what did you most enjoy? Yeah, salary is definitely a big one. Collaboration, I see a lot of, working with teams, interacting with people. Great, yeah, collaborating with others, that was a big one for me. Yeah, believing in the purpose and the mission of where you are, for sure. Great, we'll just stay on this for another couple seconds, let anybody else chime in. Yeah, tuition reimbursement, hey, it's a reality. Wonderful. Yeah. So again, I would just encourage you to write these things down and keep them in a safe place so that you can, again, uncover more of your passions and make connections, stay connected rather to these passions when you're really trying to pursue a job or a career. Okay, and then on the flip side, I just want us to think about, and it could be that same job that you just reflected on for what was most enjoyable. Think about what was least enjoyable, right? What did you just really not enjoy about that particular job? Yeah, that was a really big one for me, who put the uncertainty of future development. Where am I going from here? Yes, the amount of hours, politics. Yeah, these are all really great. Yeah. Lack of communication, right? No upward mobility, not a lot of opportunity to grow. Yeah, these are all really valid reasons to not enjoy something, for sure. Okay. So as I said, after teaching for a while, I recognized that I wanted to further my education. I wanted to go in and I really wanted to specialize in the teaching of literacy and, further myself as an educator in this area. So I had my sights on Teachers College. I was introduced to Teachers College when I was in the classroom, and we had a lot of professional development consultants come in and support us with a variety of things, curriculum, classroom management, et cetera. And I started to recognize that Teachers College was the mecca, right, of education. If you wanted to go to the best, you needed to go to TC. Well, at least that was my perception of things. So I applied, and I got in, very fortunately, still a little bit shockingly, perhaps, and was very excited to pursue a major in the teaching of English. So I was actually in the English education department, which is housed in the larger arts and humanities department, for those of you who are at TC, or even for those of you who are not in the audience. And I knew right away that this was the right place for me personally and academically. I was really, really excited to be there. But even at that point, I wasn't totally sure of what I wanted to do with myself professionally. I knew I was in the right field. I knew that I really wanted to stay in education, but I also knew that I didn't want to go the traditional route of professorship. And I knew I didn't want to go right back into the classroom. And because of that, I was sort of an anomaly, certainly among my peers, because a lot of my peers wanted to become a professor or to go back into the classroom, and now with their doctorate. And so again, I sort of found myself feeling a little bit unsure. So with that, I think I wanted to offer tip number 3, which I found really, really helpful for me, which is to ask a ton of questions. So for me, I would try to talk and visit with as many people as I could. I would seek out the important people. I spent a lot of time in my department office, and I would just kind of march in there and make friends with them so that they knew my name. And I would really ask them questions like, who can I talk to about, or who would be a good resource when it comes to, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I would write down all of the questions that I had. Again, as you can notice, I'm a big sort of journal and kind of notebook keeper. And I would write down any questions that came to me or that I was curious about. And even if they didn't sound right at first, or if I wasn't sure if they were going to last or become some of those more powerful questions, I would write them down anyway. And this would be a tip that would be particularly helpful for those of you who may just be graduating, right? And who are kind of trying to enter into the professional world. This tip can be particularly useful to you. I don't know how many of you are at TC, but I certainly found it as a place where you kind of had to do a lot of the legwork and ask a lot of the questions, because I didn't always find it as helpful to me, or the accessibility to information didn't come super easy to me. So I often had to take the bull by the horns and seek out those individuals on my own. So I attended also, what I wanted to share was that I attended a lot of panels and networking events. I remember one of them was actually titled perfectly, Exploring Non-Professorship Opportunities in the Field of Education, which I knew was perfect. So I attended a lot of similar networking events, and whenever they came up, I would try to make sure that I was available. And like I said, I would continue to write down questions as I attended these different events to kind of keep them in safe record and be able to refer back to them. And why ask a lot of questions, right? Why engage in something like this? And as I said before, figuring out what you don't want to do is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than figuring out what you do want to do. I think that casting a really wide net at first, of maybe going to things that you wouldn't necessarily think would be of interest to you, I would encourage you to try, because you never know. And if anything, it will help you narrow down your focus and sort of filter out the things that you are not interested in. And then I also wanted to offer you some of the really powerful and helpful questions that I've identified for myself, which are these. Feel free to steal them, feel free to tweak them, but I would really try to ask, what does success look like in this position? And what are some of the criteria for success? And I found that these questions became really effective for me, whether I was in an interview and I was interviewing for a position, or whether I was having a conversation with someone about their job and their profession, or if I was attending a panel and people were talking about their different experiences. These questions, I think, provided a lot of clarity for me in terms of what is the day-to-day of this position? What is the larger goal? How will my sort of value and worth and responsibilities be measured? So these questions, like I said, were particularly helpful to me, and I wanted to offer them to you. So throughout my exploration, right, and a lot of the different events that I attended, I actually came across an opportunity to be a Zankel Fellow. And I don't know, again, if any of you are familiar with this or you've been a Zankel Fellow before, but it's an opportunity for students at Teachers College to work directly with youth in the community and earn a stipend to help them support their education. And I actually, the site that I selected to be a fellow was at CPET, was at the Center for Professional Education of Teachers, which was really, really exciting. And what I was doing initially was working alongside teachers and students to help them imagine projects that would culminate in student-authored publications, which is actually what Alyssa was alluding to before with the Student Press Initiative. So I was a Zankel Fellow working closely with the Student Press Initiative. And as you can see, it was a new job, but I was definitely still in the field of education. And I was really excited about this kind of new opportunity, which, again, I knew about professional development. I knew what professional development was, but I didn't necessarily see myself in professional development initially. And over time, I noticed, and again, through those reflections that I was doing, that I was really enjoying this work. And I was promoted rather quickly to a part-time professional development coach, where I took on more work and more responsibilities. I was working in more schools. I was doing more kind of traditional coaching work with teachers. And I was using what I learned in my own classrooms to inform the suggestions and the strategies that I would offer to teachers. I was then doing really well, and I was promoted about a year or two later to full-time. And I was working full-time while also pursuing my doctorate and writing my dissertation. Still don't really know how I did that, but I did. And I was a full-time senior professional development advisor for CPET as well, which again involved, obviously more of a time commitment and doing this more full-time, working with more schools. And then I also started to manage other coaches and take on more responsibilities from a management and leadership perspective. And that actually led to my current position, which I just transitioned into in 2017. So as Alyssa said, I'm currently the Director of Program Development, and my jobs really include coaching, management and coordination, and doing a lot of outreach and promotion, which ironically or coincidentally connects back to my education and what I went to school for, which is marketing and communications and sales and all of that. And I've really been able to marry a lot of my skill sets in my current position. So as you noticed, like I said, I really kind of found my place. I found my field in the field that I was really passionate about. And I've been with CPET now for about 8 years, and I am feeling particularly fulfilled. And I think this brings me to my tip number 4, which is that you are your greatest advocate. And I really, really strongly believe that. And what I think really helped me grow and thrive at CPET was, in fact, advocating for myself and really recognizing my strengths and what I thought I brought to the table and what I think I was really good at, and voicing that. And as a female in a male-dominated field, it can feel really uncomfortable to speak up for yourself or to talk about your worth or your values, and even more so to talk about money. But when I was able to articulate my thoughts and advocate for myself, it always worked to my advantage. And I was able to move up rather quickly and really mold my career into what I found was most interesting, most fulfilling for me. And I was able to earn various promotions and rather significant bumps in salary. And what I would do is I would really seek out time and opportunity to meet with my supervisors or my superiors. And I would, like I said, keep a list of my strengths and what I thought I brought to the table. And I would seek out feedback as much as I could. So I always, tried to ask questions like, how are things going? Is there areas that I can improve? I would always share what I found most interesting about the work that I was doing and the things that I found most passionate, because again, I thought that would allow my supervisor, my boss, to see that this was an area that I was really interested in potentially growing. And because these conversations can feel a little uncomfortable or feel a little awkward, I would often rehearse them, and I would rehearse them with my husband, who is gracious enough to role play with me. And I just wanted to suggest that because, like I said, they can be a bit uncomfortable initially. So the more that you can kind of practice, the better. And I think the why here is, like I said, you are your greatest advocate, and having these conversations rather can really help you grow and thrive. And ensure that you are fulfilled and really sustained in your career. And I think also what's really important is that this can help avoid complacency and a sense of resentfulness that you might feel if, again, those of you that you're in a position that you enjoy, but you don't necessarily how you can grow, or you're interested in growing. I think that when you don't grow, it is very often the case that you become complacent or you become resentful, and that's really not a great place to be at all. And I think lastly, advocating for yourself is important because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't ask those questions, you don't have those conversations with your boss or the people that you're sort of working under, you don't know what the opportunities to grow are. And so why not ask those questions? So I think what I want us to do now, which I think is a wonderful exercise to sort of practice this idea of advocating for yourself, is I want you to think about what you recognize as your greatest strengths and your greatest assets and what you really bring to the table. And just go ahead and kind of put those out there in the word cloud. Nice. Creative, organized is a great one. Productive, learner, perpetual learner, for sure. Communication. Nice. Just let a couple more people jump in there. Intuitive, I like that. I think somebody takes initiative. Great. Yeah, for sure. And like I said, again, I would just encourage you to not shy away from recognizing and celebrating what these things are, and in interviews and conversations with superiors, et cetera, to be sure to kind of voice these things. So I think the last sort of large takeaway, if I were to sort of sum up all of the tips that I've shared with you today, I think what I have found really, really important is that all of these tips and practices are helpful, no matter where you are in your career, right? Whether you're just starting, whether you're in a job and you're not happy, whether you're in a job and you enjoy it, but you want to grow. And I think all of these different practices are super important and super helpful, and not exclusive to a certain phase or a time in your career. And I think, for example, routinely reflecting on your experiences to determine how you feel and what's working, what might be in need of improvement. I think taking breaks are super important, and it doesn't have to be this sort of grand or really formal break. It could even just be breaks in the forms of vacations, or taking a personal day when we need it, really taking a breath if we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and recognizing when we might need to do that to ensure our mental and emotional health. I think asking a lot of questions and advocating for yourself is incredibly valuable to help ensure that you are fulfilled and satisfied in your career, and you truly understand how it is that you can grow and thrive in your current position, or any position for that matter. And like I said, really advocating for yourself, finding your voice and getting comfortable with talking about the things that you bring to the table and what you think you're worth, and talking about your salary, and talking about how you can continue to improve was really helpful for me. And I would encourage you to be able to do the same, or to certainly get to a place where you feel more comfortable doing the same. And so the last thing I wanted to do before we get into some questions is just offer some resources that, have been helpful for me. I've alluded to some of them throughout the webinar, but I just kind of wanted to name them and list them for you. So I definitely used My TC a lot, which is sort of the portal that is visible to all TC students. I'm assuming there's something similar for Columbia and for Barnard. But it's, I log in through my uni, and there's all different kinds of information on there, from like things that are for sale and job positions and panels and networking events, etc. And so, I would often look there for anything that might have been of interest to me. And they would change frequently. I would even post some things on there if I was interested in particular questions or particular jobs. And so, like I said, I just wanted to put that out there for you. I'm sure you've heard of meetup.com. That has been helpful for groups and, getting together with young professionals or, wherever you are in your career, kind of seeking out groups that might be relevant to you can be helpful. Like I said, my department was a huge resource for me. I became very good friends with the secretaries because they will be big advocates for you. They will certainly be helpful resources for you. They often know about people looking for jobs, networking events. They are very familiar with the staff, so they can refer you to certain professors or certain lecturers who may have similar interests or have had similar experiences. I definitely signed up for newsletters of organizations that were of interest to me. For example, the New Teacher Project was one that I found interesting. We have a newsletter that we put out, but kind of signing up for them and receiving them electronically. I even forgot some of that I signed up for, and then would find a helpful bit of information. LinkedIn is always really good. I know, again, these are not sort of super innovative resources, but ones that I found particularly helpful. So LinkedIn was always good for job searches and making connections with others and putting your skills out there, and having people sort of advocate for you and promote you can be empowering. And then lastly, we're certainly in the world of social media, so I would follow any individual or organization that I was interested in, because this was the fastest way or sort of platform to receive information. So you could even find out about an event the day of, or if somebody's tweeting something that a presentation that they're doing. This was a way to be in many places at different times. And so I always found that really helpful for me. So I think with that, I definitely wanted to make sure we had time for questions or thoughts, and I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa to do that.
Hi, everyone. So if you have some questions, feel free to shoot them over in the questions pane, and we'll start taking questions. While we wait for some questions, I also would like to mention 2 other resources that we have at Teachers College. So Cristina mentioned the MyTC portal, which is great. And within MyTC portal, there is under services, there's a link called TCCS link, which is through the Office of Career Education and Professional Development. They show all their events, and they have all the job postings that my Office of Alumni Relations, as well as their office, receive. And the events that they talk about is also like job fairs and networking nights. So that's something that I've used. And then the Office of Alumni Relations is currently working on our alumni directory called TC Connect that will be launching soon and will be available to all TC graduates, which will be another form of networking. So it looks like we have a couple of questions, so we'll get to those. Mm-hmm. So one person asked, what advice would you offer to a TC alum? This alum has an MA in International Education Development with a TESOL concentration. They worked in finance for 13 years after graduation and is kind of looking for a way to return back into education after a 19-year gap. They've volunteered at NYC public schools, but they haven't been able to make a permanent switch back into education or find a way into the field. So,
interesting.
How do they get back into there?
Yeah, well, welcome back. I think some of my questions back to this particular person would be, Is it because of time? Is it strictly because of time away? And maybe that's not looking as appealing to potential schools, or is it a certification issue, or is it you haven't found the right fit? If it's certification issue, then I mean, I would definitely say to speak to the teachers. I'm forgetting the exact name of the department at Teachers College who works directly with teachers who are looking to get certification. If it's more that you just haven't, or you're not sure of how to get connected with different schools, I would say that we should definitely have a conversation. I'd be very happy to connect with you personally if that's something that you're of interest or you're interested in, because we, like I said, partner with so many different schools in the DOE and even outside of the DOE, and I'd be happy to help make some introductions for you. But I think, like I said, the tip of trying to set up some conversations, some informal interviews with principals or with teachers, asking to visit some of the schools, which I know a lot of the principals that I work with would be very open to, could be a good starting place.
So the office that you were thinking of is the Office of Teacher Education, and they will help with getting alums certified if they need that.
Yes, thank you.
So the next question I have is, how do you deal with the feeling of uncertainty? Especially on one hand, you have a job that you know you can succeed in, but you don't like it, versus a job that looks really exciting but you haven't tried it. Like, how do you decide which way to go?
Pose those two scenarios to me one more time, Melissa.
No, of course. So you have, on one hand, a job that you know you can succeed and do well in, but you don't like the job, you don't like the work, versus a job that looks really exciting and appealing to you. You've never really broken into that field before, but it's something that really interests you. How do you choose between the two?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and a tough one, because it's sort of, you're kind of grappling with this idea of comfort, like you kind of know what you have, and then versus excitement, but a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of uncertainty. Gosh, I think for me, like I said, asking some of those questions that I posed before could be particularly helpful here. So when you're talking with the person who you would report to, or the person that you would work closely with, kind of trying to ask as many of those tangible and specific questions might be helpful to make the decision. So what would success look like? What are some of the roles and responsibilities that I play? How are my responsibilities evaluated? Things like that. Like, trying to get as much tangible information as I can would help me make that decision. But I can also say that from experience, taking a leap has been beneficial for me, and taking a risk. And I think it's okay if, for me at first, it wasn't like this, but I can certainly appreciate it now, that it's okay if it ends up not working out. And like you saw before, I bounced around a lot, but it was very helpful for me to then determine what I liked and what I didn't like. So I hope that helps.
So someone had a question regarding your education. You had mentioned in the beginning that you went to NYU and you got your BS in it, and then that you got your doctorate at TC. Did you get a master's in between? And if so, what did you get your master's in?
Yes, I did. So when I was teaching in the elementary school in third grade, the Teaching Fellows paid for my master's in the evening, which was a really wonderful incentive of the program. And I was attending, they were linked with all of the CUNYs. So I was selected to attend Brooklyn College because it was actually closest to me. So I was pursuing a master's in childhood education, which again was very helpful because it helped inform a lot of what I was doing in the classroom.
Great. The next question is, how can I get connected with opportunities that require more than the experiences that I have right now?
So for me, I did a lot. Like I said, I would still attend, even in my current position or throughout my positions at CPET, I would attend different events. I mean, the nice thing is that when you're working at TC, you have access to a lot of courses, and I even ask professors to audit their class sometimes. So that usually consisted of me participating in their class for no credit, but they would also make very clear that they wouldn't grade any of my papers or, sort of add any of my work to their workload. But I found it helpful to just sort of visit other courses and attend different panels to help further myself and stay current on the field and what other opportunities were out there. And also a lot of online courses were available. So if I couldn't be somewhere physically, I would engage in some online courses and online workshops that are available.
Great. So the next question I have is, you mentioned about taking a break after you kind of realize that you're doing the same thing and it's just not the right thing. So you just need to kind of take a step back. But how long is too long for a break?
Yeah, I think that, so my break in total was about 8 months. And it was actually timed, what really sort of determined the end of my break or defined the end of my break was the application process for the New York City Teaching Fellows. So that was helpful in terms of, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to hit these deadlines. But if you don't have something tangible like that, it's hard. And I didn't want to make that decision for someone. I think that it really has to feel good to you. It's sort of similar to what I had to do with writing my dissertation, right? Like you kind of set a deadline and you really try to hold yourself accountable to that, but you don't beat yourself up for it if you need to push it back a little bit. And I think the good question to ask is, does this still feel productive to me? What have I tried? Am I sort of procrastinating and using this as an escape? Am I engaging in any of those other tips that I suggested? Like, am I reflecting? Am I writing? Am I asking questions? Am I seeking out different individuals? I think those are good questions to ask yourself and to gauge whether or not you're sort of falling into the trap of procrastination, or if you just honestly need some more time.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question that I have is kind of goes along with the previous question that I just asked is, I mean, if you're going to take a break and you're trying to go into a different field, when you're re-entering the workforce, how do you explain the gap in your employment or the change in direction that you're going in at interviews or at informational interviews and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really valid question and something that I worried about a little bit. And I think that I found that I worried about it much more than I needed to. And I certainly know that everybody's experience is different, but I was never asked the direct question in interviews, what accounts for this gap here? I think if I was asked, I would speak candidly and I would say, my current jobs prior to, or the jobs that I was engaged in prior to that, I found myself, doing, and I was working, but I wasn't necessarily fulfilled. And so rather than continue to explore similar positions, I really wanted to take a break to regroup and think about what I really wanted to do and make sure that I moved forward in a way that was more meaningful and more fulfilling for me.
Great. So the next question that I have is, what are examples of professional opportunities for a TC graduate other than traditional teaching? So just to give you some background, this alum has an MA in Social Studies education with an expired teaching license. Mm-hmm. So to go back to the question, I'm a little afraid to go back into high school teaching since I had a really bad experience as a young teacher.
Mm-hmm. Come work for us. Yeah, I mean, like that's what helped me transition into professional development, is that I knew I didn't really want to go back into the classroom. I knew I didn't want to go to the professorship route. So I dabbled in the field of professional education and found it incredibly fulfilling because it was kind of a beautiful marrying of all of my experiences in education and what I enjoyed. So yeah, like I said, come talk to me if in fact this sounds of interest to you, because I certainly find it incredibly fulfilling coming from the classroom and being in the field of education.
Great. So we don't have any more questions, but we'll wait for a little bit to see if anyone has any burning last questions. Of course, if you have a question that you feel a little sensitive about, Cristina's information is on the slide right now. Please feel free to email her, learn more about CPET, but we'll wait a little bit and see if we have any last-minute questions.
Sure. And I also just wanted to plug, we have a new teacher network, and I didn't put that on here, but our new teacher network is for TC students who are entering or who are graduating with their certification and their master's, or even their doctorate, and are interested in pursuing a job in the classroom and teaching in a school. And so that can also be a really wonderful resource for you. It's a 3-year opportunity, and there are various resources and networking events and online portals. So that's definitely a good resource as well that I just wanted to make you aware of. And if you have more questions, you can visit our website as well.
So I think we're done with questions, but of course, if you didn't get your question answered or you wanted to want Cristina to elaborate a little bit more, feel free to email her. Her email is on the slide. Cristina, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share your expertise with the TC community. I would like to also note that the video of this presentation will be available on our website shortly in a few days, and that URL is www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Please visit our website for more information about upcoming events. I just also want to let you know that we have our Global TC Day on July 25th, so definitely keep an eye out on that. And the Alumni Career Development Webinar series will begin again in September. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.